welcome to Cocktail Mode, the podcast where me, Andy, and my mate Dave, say hello Dave,
hello,
pick a retro computer game and try and pair it with a cocktail of some sort. Today we're talking about Resident Evil 2, Code Veronica, and a few others along the way as well. Dave is going to lean into his curmudgeonly PC gamer persona.
I don't know about that.
And we're going to slaughter a fair few sacred cows along the way as well. Resident Evil 4, Portal 2 and Mass Effect all get a bit of a shellacking today. So if you want to hear that, then stay tuned.
Itchy. Tasty. I made some notes and in big bold letters I've just got itchy, tasty.
It is great, isn't it?
You're reading this diary, it's like, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. Jonesy got bitten by a dog. Tough shit. I tried to leave today and they wouldn't let me. The suit I've been given is making my skin itch a bit. A bit of rotten flesh fell off today. Wait, what? Steve came to visit me. I didn't like him, so I ate him.
Yeah.
And then the next page is just itchy, tasty.
That's great. And it's really, really well put together, that bit. And there was a couple of bits like that in the game. So have you had fun playing lots of Resident Evil this week?
I haven't managed to play much, I've got to be honest.
No?
I knew I had it on an emulator, on a PlayStation emulator. And the emulator I've got is from about 1972. in internet years. It's one called EPSXE.
Oh, I know that one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I downloaded it 2004.
And is it still the same version you've got? You haven't got any of the
Still the same version, still works. It does still work.
Amazing.
Just not particularly well. So I downloaded a new one a little while ago called Duck Station.
Yeah, that's the one I've got on my Steam Deck.
That is fantastic. That works so well. Some really, really good options on there as well. So I was playing it on that a little bit earlier on. But the first sort of attempt at giving it a playthrough was the remastered version, which appeared on my Steam library after you joined the family sharing thing.
Oh, right. I haven't actually played it myself.
Excellent. Free version of the Resident Evil remaster. I hated it.
Did you?
I really couldn't go on with it. And when I started to play the normal PS1 version, I really didn't enjoy it.
Really?
It took me quite a while to get back into the swing of it.
Wow.
I went back and played Resident Evil 2 when the remake was coming out. And I know for a fact I still like that. And I can still play that quite happily.
Yeah.
But something about the first one, it's just, I don't know, it feels clunkier. Because there's very little difference in control method, in menus, in anything else between 1 and 2.
No, I agree.
Playing 1 wasn't a pleasurable experience for me.
Oh, that's sad.
But I'll stick with it, because like I say, now I've got the better emulator running.
Yeah.
I can play the proper original version of it.
I had the exact opposite experience. I went back and played it and was amazed at how not janky I thought it was.
I think the main problem is I'm trying to play it on a 37-inch LCD TV, and those games upscaled to that degree never look any good. No. If I had an old CRT TV that I could plug into and plug the PlayStation into it, then I'm sure it'd be fine and it'd be like going back in time.
Yeah.
But I don't, so
no.
It's the only option I had, really.
It is one of the things with the Steam Deck, actually, with a nice CRT filter on and the small screen. I think it helps a lot. I don't often have the need to use an emulator. I'm that lucky, but when I do, I think the smaller the screen, the better. Because I think as much as upscaling is very good these days, and there's lots of nice tricks and things, it doesn't ever look quite right. And I think especially with something like Resident Evil, the graphics look incredible on a CRT because you get that the depth and the lighting effects that they put on those. And I mean, as much as those hand drawn backgrounds and the lighting on the CRT look fantastic. I mean, I'm sure that the fanciest OLED TVs in the world look pretty smart, but it's probably going to be in the wrong aspect ratio. It's going to be too big, and I just think a good 14-inch CRT will do you perfect.
Yeah, you kind of need to play it on what it was originally designed to be played on, don't you? As much as possible.
I saw a CRTV 14-inch one at the side of the road this morning. And I didn't pick it up because I've got too many already, but I hope somebody else did.
Did you feel bad for it?
Yeah, but if it worked, I mean, that is better than any LCD TV, especially if you're plugging in anything up to, well, what we cover on this podcast of our version of retro up to about 2000. Even most PlayStation 2 games were designed for CRT and 4:3 ratio as well. widescreen ratio. There's very few PlayStation 2 games that are actually designed to go in a widescreen ratio.
It was during that era, wasn't it? I remember the Dreamcast having like 50, 60 hertz options and widescreen options on a lot of games.
Yeah.
So that was literally the point in time when they became a bit more popular, a bit more widespread, enough so that they would have an option within a game.
Yes.
To allow you to change to widescreen ratios.
I mean, obviously in Europe and the UK, having that 50, 60 hertz switch was an absolute godsend because games played at the proper speed and looked incredible. The Dreamcast looks brand new to this day. With the right game, you look at Jet Set Radio on a CRT TV playing at 60 hertz, it just looks absolutely stunning. So you didn't enjoy Resident Evil?
Not as much as I was expecting to. I think it was a case of expectations being very, very high and hefty dose of rose-tinted glasses.
How much did you play?
Not a huge amount at all.
Play until you died? No,
actually, I didn't even get that far in. I mean, one of the main things I wanted to do was go back and look at those early intro, the FMV sequences. Because of the real thing of wanting to find out if the people who acted in those videos had ever done anything else. I did manage to find online, somebody found and interviewed the guy who played Barry.
Oh, wow.
Years and years after the fact, and have managed to get in touch with like all of the other people except for one of them. I think it might have been the girl who played Rebecca. They just couldn't find her. Just like vanished off the planet.
She looked really young in that video as well, didn't she?
Well, she's supposed to be 18, so if she is 18, then yeah, it's probably about right. Yeah, Barry's, according to his bio that comes up in the opening video, 38.
Wow.
It's the oldest looking 38-year-old in the fucking world. But no, I love it. I love that original FMV intro, which apparently was quite an afterthought. I don't know if you've read about it, but they basically finished the game almost. Shinji Mikami, or whatever his name is, the director of it, was like, got this CD technology. Why don't we get some like real life footage shot and put some FMV sequences in there? So they literally just put out like a casting call for anybody non-Japanese who lives in Japan and can come out for 5 days filming in the woods near Mount Fuji. Well, they already had the character models from the game, so they wanted people who specifically met that set of features. So, yeah, older, larger, ginger guy for Barry, and the others just kind of slotted into place. The woman who played Jill hated it because it was all shot at night. It was really cold. It was probably quite cheap, I'd imagine. I doubt there was much budget for it.
I know. I kind of hate it. I know people love it for its cheesiness. Yeah, I kind of hate it. I dislike the disconnect between, that real video and then the character models. I know that's a bit serious, but I'm sorry. I can't help how I feel. It
definitely has a place in my heart because of how cheesy it was. And as soon as you see those videos at the start, you just say, it's a cheesy B-movie, horror movie. I did have to laugh, though. I still jumped at the fucking dogs coming through that first window.
I did as well.
I knew they were there. As soon as I entered that corridor, I knew what was going to happen. It still made me jump.
I did exactly the same thing. Because it is, you open that door and the shot's there and you're like, oh, it's this bit with the dog. And you start running and you go, Jesus Christ. Just reminded me talking about how Shinji Mikami and his, being the director, and then Hideki Kamiya was the director of 2, and that's a heck of a lineup, isn't it, for your first 2 games in your series? Those are the 2 of the greatest Japanese auteur directors there are. And Kamiya has still never made a bad game to this day. Really? Resident Evil 2 was his first game. He has never made a bad game. All of his games are like top tier in my eyes. Obviously, opinion is a wonderful thing, but he did it. Akami, he did, and then he played Akami. That's incredible.
Yeah, I know you find this hard to believe. I've heard of it.
First Bayonet is his. Devil May Cry is his. Everything he does is absolute gold.
I've never rated the Devil May Cry games.
The first Devil May Cry started off as a Resident Evil project.
Oh, okay.
So that was Resident Evil 2, one of the aborted Resident Evil 2s. end up being Devil May Cry. And then there was another one, which is apparently, I didn't know about this, but apparently there's Resident Evil 1.5, which was I think finished as a fan project or as an ongoing fan project now, where they found the files. But basically, the publisher and Kamiya got together and said, we got all this work and we've done all this work and this game's rubbish, so we're going to bin it and start again.
Wow.
It's like, Jesus. That's some faith, isn't it? Considering the game that they ended up with was Resident Evil 2, probably a great shout, isn't it?
Here's a question for you. Is Resident Evil 2 the best game on the PlayStation?
No.
What is?
Tomb Raider.
No, I don't think it is. I think it's Resident Evil 2. There's not much in it, I'll give you that.
So I think I have over 100 original PlayStation games now. It's one of my most loved machines, and I think it has such an incredible catalogue of games.
Yeah.
That's just the 100 I've got, let alone the other 1,000 or however many games there were that... in case you don't know this about me, I don't like JRPGs. I don't like RPGs in general, mostly. So all of those on the original PlayStation out the window. And you think that some of those games that people consider the best games ever made. Yeah, I'm just not into it.
That's fair. And how many games do you think there are on the PlayStation?
1,200?
4,105.
Jesus Christ.
2,500 of those are just FIFA. I tell you what, I bet there's a fuck ton of things like Caesar's Palace, fruit machines, simulators, and shit like that. There's hundreds of things like that.
Yeah.
Who buys them?
It takes me back to working my way through MAME, and the amount of those I just deleted based on the name. And I say I played everything on MAME. I didn't. Those things, they just got deleted. I'm not going to waste my time. I know what it is. 7,000
different versions of Mahjong.
Again, I quite sort of casually and blasé just threw Tomb Raider down as a competition for the Resident Evil 2's crown as the best game on the PlayStation.
I think there's a debate to be had there. I don't think that's a cut and dry thing at all.
Do you know what? It's not even cut and dry between those two, because I've just got my list up on my screen here. And so other contenders, you've got Ape Escape, you've got Bushido Blade, Driver, Einhander. ISS Pro Evolution 2 is the greatest football game ever made. Motor 2 Grand Prix 2 is going. Gran Turismo is another contender, gotta be.
Gran Turismo I'd put up there definitely as the best driving game on the PS1.
You got Street Fighter Alpha 3, which is, the best single player Street Fighter game. The Tekken's of unit of that. Time Crisis we've already talked about at length.
Yeah.
Tobal number 1. 3 Wipeouts to choose from.
Second one's the best.
And 3 Tomb Raiders to choose from.
Yeah, first one's the only one that really counts for Tomb Raider for me.
You could say 3 Resident Evils to choose from.
Well, technically 4. Resident Evil Director's Cut, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3.
Yeah.
Well, I was watching a video earlier on today, and it was every Resident Evil game and listing every system it had come out on. And it stopped at 2020, so there's like a couple since. But when it got to Resident Evil 4... it listed a console I'd never heard of and had to Google. I thought, what the hell is that? I've never even heard the word before. It is the wonderful Zeebo.
Zeebo?
You've never heard of it?
Never heard of a Zeebo.
Oh, I found a console you've never heard of. ZEEBO.
Right.
It was a console brought out in, let's say, developing economies.
Right.
Which were quite probably the largest regions that piracy was rife.
Yeah.
And the games companies never made it much money from those areas. So they came up with this idea of a low-cost console. And bearing in mind it's like 2009, it had internet functionality, it came with a keyboard as well as controllers. Really good idea. A cheaper console that will steer people away from pirating games and actually paying for them. The only problem was it was a piece of shit. And the games are fucking terrible. It was basically built on almost like mobile phone technology of the time.
Christ.
So an ARM processor and running on an operating system not too dissimilar to probably whatever the version of Android was at the time.
Yeah.
And the games were like the Nintendo DS or PSP versions of things. So you get like a packaged version of FIFA, FIFA 2009, except it would be the DS version of FIFA 2006, rebranded. God. So it died. It just vanished off the face of the earth within 2 years. They only ever released 57 games for it. God. And three of those were included on the console when you bought it.
So which Resident Evil game did it have?
Resident Evil 4.
Oh, Christ.
And it's fucking awful. I had to look it up just out of curiosity because I just thought, what the hell is that? Never even heard of it.
I quite want one.
Do you know what? You'd be lucky to find one.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
So who's your preferred character to play as? Chris or Jill?
Jill, but only because I always go for female characters in games.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, item management isn't quite as restrictive, is it?
She's got 2 more slots.
Perfect to facilitate the Jill sandwich, doesn't it? It's an interesting thing, I think, with sort of the 2 characters, because it's something that the series has very much kept going, isn't it? And it's become sort of the identity of the series without ever really being called out as such. The having 2 different characters and they always do that, and the multiple times playing through. And I think when that started to go away was probably Code Veronica. I think you did have 2 characters, but it was very linear. You played as
wasn't there like a halfway point, and from there it was exactly the same? Am I remembering that a bit wrong?
No, if I remember my Code Veronica correctly, you start the story as Claire.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's not even halfway through, it's more like 3/4 of the way through. She gets captured, I think, and you then start playing as Chris and have to rescue her. And there's a tiny bit in the middle where you play as the world's most annoying character and shoot up a whole bunch of shit. Steve, who is apparently, I have learned over the last few days, the most hated character in all of Resident Evil lore. Is it Steve? Steve Burnside, his name is.
Steve Burnside. Wow.
Yeah, and he's in the way that the acting and the scripts is always terrible in the Resident Evil games. He comes across like a 13-year-old kid, and he's supposed to be a fair chunk older than that. And there's a sort of a very forced romantic angle with Claire during his random interactions with her throughout the game. He's incredibly annoying.
Don't remember him at all.
And he very, very nearly ruins Code Veronica.
Really?
Yeah, he's so obnoxious. But
I don't remember him at all.
Do you not?
I don't remember a lot of the game. I've got to be honest. Code Veronica is a big blank spot in my memory. No, I can remember almost the entire plot of 1 and 2.
Yeah.
I know for a fact I finished Code Veronica. The only bit from Code Veronica I can remember is there's a bit where you have to snipe a tyrant on the roof or a helipad or something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Goes first person, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. As you're playing as Claire, this character just turns up and is about, I don't know if it's ever revealed that he's involved somehow in anything, or if he's just an annoying twat who turns up because he just happens to be there. But yeah, he just sort of hangs around, and every now and again he turns up and is obnoxious for a bit, and then he buggers off again, thankfully. But yeah, no, he's a prick. He's really, really unpleasant to be around.
I've got to play Code Veronica again, clearly.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, what Code Veronica does, I think why I've got a bit of a soft spot for Code Veronica, even though I don't think the properly sort of 3D backgrounds have anywhere near the same level of atmosphere as the pre-rendered ones. I don't think they come close to feeling as oppressive or as moody or as classy, really, as those original 1, 2. I'm going to skip 3 and come back to it in a minute because...
Should we just skip 3 in general for the whole fucking thing? Because I've never played it. I can't talk about it.
Well, okay. So what Code Veronica did was it felt like it was getting back to the format that the games did better. And there were some lovely camera things because it was fully 3D engine. It was fixed camera, but they moved as well. So you couldn't move them, but they moved. And there were some lovely little cinematic pans and sweeps and they still kept the restrictive view, and it worked brilliantly. And 3 did that as well, but 3 is desperately trying to be an action game. And it's not, and it can't be, because it is still tank controls and it's still the same old Resident Evil format, but they just give you a shit ton more ammo. There are a shit ton more zombies on screen at once, and it really is sort of leaning into the action side of it. There is a sort of a very misinformed group of people out in the world who think that the tank controls are a bad thing and the fixed camera is a bad thing, because they simply don't understand what it's doing. They don't understand that with those restrictions, that's where the fear comes from. That's where the stress comes from. That's where the challenge comes from. It feels like Resident Evil 3 is trying to edge away from that without having the structure in place to do so.
Okay. Yeah, because I've got very little experience of 3. I've probably played it for a few minutes at most, once, and that's it. I should get back to it. I should give it a go.
Absolutely, it's not bad, but it's one of those things where it doesn't look as good as Resident Evil 2. I think there's some technical improvements to the graphics. I think there's probably a level of detail on the models that's better than it was before, but it's very, very dark, because obviously they're all dark because that's the atmosphere. But the Resident Evil 2, the lighting effects and the design is stunning. And I don't think that's quite the same with 3. I think that the locations aren't as interesting. The design of the areas is a bit more bland. Have you played any of the others? You said you tried one and bounced off it a bit. Have you tried any others?
I played one, didn't get on with it originally on the emulator that I was playing it on. I didn't play any of 2 because I don't feel like I need to. I gave Code Veronica a couple of minutes earlier today, but the emulator was dreadful. I tell you what, though, I actually got to watch that opening cinematic intro to Code Veronica again for the first time in God knows how many years. That is amazing.
Yeah.
The single most stupid physics thing in any CGI movie ever. How do you drop a gun, fall faster than it, catch it and shoot something?
She propels herself towards the floor faster.
No, fuck off. You can't fall faster than something else is falling. But no, ignoring that.
Ignoring that.
No, that opening cinematic intro is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I can remember seeing it for the first time, probably on a demo disc. Actually, thinking about it, did we get demo discs?
Yeah, there was famously a demo disc on a Dreamcast. There were
Action Replay that let you play copied games. Yes.
Yeah, I still have one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for those who don't know, there's a Dreamcast magazine called Dream On, which wasn't an official Dreamcast magazine, but had relationships so tight with Sega that it may as well have been. And used to get demos and discs and CDs, and they put on the cover of their magazine an Action Replay disc for, obviously, as far as they were concerned, loading cheats and doing all that sort of, and it allowed you to bootleg games and imports, and yeah, that didn't go well for Dream On magazine. God bless him.
Given the fact that the Dreamcast existed in an internet-enabled world as well.
Yeah.
Everybody knew about it. Everybody was buying that magazine that month.
So good, but I think there was the official Dreamcast magazine and Dream On both had cover discs, and I think the cover disc quite often had videos and trailers rather than playable demos.
Yes, yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah, I can imagine that the intro for Code Veronica would have been one of those. But yeah, I've got a lot of time for Code Veronica, but I think a lot of that is tied to my love for the Dreamcast, which is as much as it's weird to have actual emotions about a piece of hardware. It's a piece
of yellow plastic.
Yeah, mine's still grey, thankfully.
Really?
Yeah,
done well.
Yeah, I got a lot of love for the Dreamcast, and I think my love for Code Veronica is more to do with that than it is for the relative merits of Code Veronica on its own. But it is very much back to the puzzles and explorations and the leaning on the sort of the environments and that kind of feeling about that. I think Resident Evil 3 wasn't so focused on. I mean, what's great about Code Veronica is when you do go and you go back later in the game when you're playing as Chris and you're revisiting the areas when you were there as Claire, they've changed. Because of what happened when Claire was in them, and subsequently they've changed. There are things have burnt down. There's explosions that have happened, and it's just you can see that happening. It's just a very cool thing.
Yeah, because there's like a sort of weird sandworm at some point.
Yes,
you remember that?
Fairly near the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the Bandersnatchers are the proper fuckers in that game.
I love Bandersnatch as a word. It always makes me laugh.
I want to hear your rage at Resident Evil 4. Because from the end of last week's episode, you sounded very angry about...
I hate Resident Evil 4. I've seen it being played, and I know... from watching it as a spectator, who invites you around their house to let you watch them play a single player game? I fucking hate that. I always have. But that aside, the control method, the behind the person, third person thing, moving around what should be a mouse controlled first person aiming reticule with a controller, I'm awful at it. I mean, have you ever played a first-person shooter with a controller? Something like, I don't know, Halo or Call of Duty. It's awful. It takes 5 times longer than it takes with a mouse to move the cursor from one side of the screen to the other.
I think I may have played the light gun shooting section, the Die Hard 2 section of Die Hard Trilogy with a controller.
That was awesome. I love that game.
If that's possible, either I've just made that up or I've done that. I've got recollection of playing that with a controller.
Pretty sure that was the only option.
I mean, I think you could light gun it, couldn't you?
I don't think you could. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was controller only.
That probably deserves an episode, doesn't it? Die Hard Trilogy.
Die Hard Trilogy? Oh, yeah, definitely. That's on the list.
Oh, cool. We'll be doing that.
I fucking better be anyway if it's not. It's going on there right now.
I'd love to play that again, actually. I haven't played that for donkey's years.
But yeah, where was I? Resident Evil 4.
Yeah.
At the time, I'd been into PC gaming for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So it was about 2003, 2004 it came out?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd been pretty much exclusively playing PC games by then. I'd had things like Half-Life, proper first-person shooters, playing with a proper control method. I used to sit there watching my mate James play it, and just think, good God, it's so slow. To drag the analog stick and the cursor just makes its way eventually over to the side of the screen. Fucking hell, I could have spun round 5 times by now on a first-person shooter. If Resident Evil 4 had come out on the PC at the same time as the PS2 version, nobody would remember the PS2 version. The control method would have been so much better.
So here's the thing, right? I disagree.
Why?
I'll tell you why. So there is a thing, and we were talking before about the Resident Evil tank control method and the fixed camera angles and how that adds to the experience by placing restrictions on you and making things difficult and awkward and tense because of that. And there's another game, Fatal Frame 4, which is a Wii game, and that is I don't know if you played any of the Fatal Frames or Project Zero they're called in the West.
It's just the one we photograph ghosts.
That's the one, yeah.
I've heard of it. Literally, I've heard of it today for the first time ever. I think somebody may have once described it to me, and I didn't know the name. When I read about it earlier on, I thought, I'm sure I've heard of that before.
Yeah. So in Fatal Frame 4, which is a Wii exclusive, you would imagine that in this world of an IR pointer, you would point your camera by pointing your controller at the screen and taking pictures. But they deliberately didn't do it. They deliberately instead implemented a twist control sort of weird thing for aiming the camera to input that stress level, that non-immediate control, deliberately so. And that's why I disagree. What I have first hand I can back this up is that I have only played Resident Evil 4 on the Wii, and it does have IR pointer, so more immediate than a mouse. You just literally, and it is too easy. It breaks the game. It takes away all the challenge, and all the. It's not difficult. It's not stressful. There's no, there's no fear there. You just point at the thing and make the thing die. It's as easy as that. I'm not the world's biggest fan of Resident Evil 4 for other reasons than you are, but I think I get where you're coming from. But I think there is something to be said for non-immediate controls in what should be a stressful game environment. My problem with Resident Evil 4 is it is the only game in all my years of gaming. I've been playing games since the 80s. A long time.
Since before recorded history.
There is only one game in all that time where I have skipped story elements because I was so fucking bored by it. And that game is Resident Evil 4.
I'm going to have to make you play Final Fantasy 13.
There are these talking heads elements at the end of Resident Evil 4 where it's just this weird little pirate kid yabbing on screen. So it's like you've got screen divided in half. And maybe I've just imagined. Maybe I was making up my own story by then because I was so fucking bored of what was going on.
Keep going.
In my brain, you've got probably, I don't know, Chris Redfield on one screen and this weird little pirate kid on the other screen. And it's just going on and on and on. And it's just like, right, no, skip. I just cannot be bothered anymore. It's the only time I've ever done it, ever. And it was Resident Evil 4. I don't hate it, but I'm not the fan that everyone else is of Resident Evil 4. It does seem... I actually enjoyed Resident Evil 5 more, and that's pretty much sacrilege to say. Resident Evil 5 is very much not... It's not, at this point, a Resident Evil game anymore. It's such an action game. It's so focused on combat that everything else is secondary. But in terms of what it was and playing it, and I played it exclusively in co-op, I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed playing Resident Evil 4. Yeah, so Resident Evil 5 is as far as I got. I played the demo of Resident Evil 6 and it was so bad that I've never touched a Resident Evil game since.
I've never even seen so much as a screenshot of 6.
Yeah, it's not worth your time even looking at, to be honest with you. It's such a mess. It's like they've tried to tick all the boxes. So the people who want more action, the people who want more horror, then they've just tried to split the game into 3 types of game. You step through them individually rather than it's a bit of a mess. Sweet Home, for those who don't know, and I'm pretty sure it's fairly widely known now. Sweet Home was an RPG on the Famicom and particularly the Famicom because it never got a US or a European release. On the NES or the NES as proper people will call it. And it is basically, for all intents and purposes, a top-down Resident Evil released in 1989. It's you've got a team of people you switch between and solve puzzles. The combat is random encounter RPG stuff and very basic, so that's not quite the same thing. But there is so much of Sweet Home that you can see the lineage through to Resident Evil, through to the fact that Sweet Home for atmosphere. Sweet Home's got sequences where when you open a door, it shows that first-person view of the door opening with a creaky sound, as it does it exactly like Resident Evil. Though Resident Evil obviously uses it to hide loading screens, but you didn't need that on the NES. But it was just something they did for design, and it's one of the best-looking NES games I've seen. It's really, really got some fantastic visual effects and art assets. There are even people who claim that Resident Evil was originally conceived as a remake of Sweet Home, but there's no real evidence to that, but it is completely believable. I think that's probably why that sort of rumour persists, because it is so believable.
I don't think that's rumour, mate. I think that's been substantiated.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I couldn't find anything to substantiate it.
I could be wrong, but from what I gathered, the original conception of Resident Evil was as a remake of Sweet Home.
Find yourself somebody's video on the internet if you don't want to play. I played it a bit myself. I don't like RPGs, and I really quite enjoyed it. I think it's because it's very, very basic. So the sort of the more obnoxious elements of RPGs are kind of missing. There's not endless swathes of text to read through. It much like Resident Evil, the plot is revealed through discovered parchments and things that you do have to read, but in that format of breaking it down that way, it stops it becoming just slogs of text of keep on tapping to read through the pointless melodramatic nonsense that you normally get with JRPGs.
You say JRPGs, it's just RPGs.
Yeah, but it's a really, really interesting game. It's sort of way ahead of its time, clearly influenced Resident Evil. But the thing that interests me is there are people, when you say this, you could go out onto the internet now, to internet people, because real people don't talk about these things. Go and say if you say to enough internet people that Resident Evil was clearly inspired or is a progression of spiritual successor to Sweet Home, they will go, no, it's not. It's Alone in the Dark.
I wondered if you'd get onto Alone in the Dark.
Well, I don't know Alone in the Dark very well.
I don't know Alone in the Dark at all. I had to read up on it to get at the most basic understanding of the series.
Well, there are things that, it is a horror game. It is. There are two characters you can play as, and I think it might even be fixed cameras.
It is, yeah. Very, very early 3D.
But I don't think sort of as much as, yes, those things are similar. It doesn't feel as close. It doesn't. It's like, that's like saying Driver and Gran Turismo are the same. They both got cars in. It's like,
I don't think anybody would ever say that Alone in the Dark and Resident Evil are the same. My sort of interpretation of the overall situation is that Sweet Home came out 1989.
Yeah.
Based off the film. Well, not just based off the film, but developed alongside the film, apparently. Yeah. Which is really interesting.
Yeah, the story goes that the director of the game, apparently he went to the set and they said, no, this is the general plot. Do what you want with it. You don't have to stick to it. Just sort of make it work, which is great, isn't it? It's a great approach. I don't know. I kind of have a bit of a reaction to Alone in the Dark being touted as the influence for Resident Evil, and I don't really know why. I can't. I'm not.
It's only because it came out first.
Well, it's not, I don't have a problem with Sweet Home being the influence for Resident Evil.
I think Sweet Home is quite clearly the influence for Resident Evil.
But I don't, for some reason.
The fucking door animation alone.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's got something. It's not just.
It's either a massive rip-off or it's a very, very fond spin-off of it.
Well, I think there is no doubt. It's like it's got the feeling of like a strong influence or like a love letter, or as you say, maybe Shinji Mikami was just a massive fan and thought, I'm making a horror game. I want to pay homage to this game that I love. There
are other references in Resident Evil, aren't there? There's references. There's definitely nods to Evil Dead. There's a camera angle when you go into a certain room that's a mounted deer's head on the wall. Yeah, that is straight out of Evil Dead. Yeah. A lot of the zombie stuff is very Romero based.
Well, of course, yeah. I remember when I first played Resident Evil, the first one, being quite disappointed when it went a bit sci-fi, and yeah, I remember sort of. I mean, now it seems silly because that's just what Resident Evil is, and it was not that for all of about 2 hours of gameplay, wasn't it? But and then it's been that for the following 200 hours of gameplay. But yeah, I remember like sort of as much as I enjoyed playing it, being disappointed that it turned out to be sci-fi rather than a horror film.
I mean, one of the things that's been present in every single zombie film, game, book, everything you could ever possibly imagine is the scientific reasoning behind why it's happening. It's always been there.
Not in Romero's films.
Isn't there a bit of a nod in Night of the Living Dead to a crashed satellite, or am I thinking of something else?
No, you're right. It's a nod to that. But in Dawn of the Dead, the tagline of the film is when
there's no more room in hell,
the dead will walk the earth. Again, one of those these days things. But people are sort of obsessed with knowing everything about a story. There is now very famous, very popular film directors who are like masters of over-exposition. They tell you like every single tiny detail of every single tiny thing of every single tiny moment in time of their films. Peter Jackson being one, and old twat-faced Batman Begins, Christopher Nolan. Being the these are people who are heralded as the best directors working today, and they cannot control their plot verbiage, their expositive diarrhea.
Expositive? I'm not sure that's a real word.
Hey Google, define expositive.
On the website collinsdictionary.com, they say, verb, to expound, to demonstrate clearly.
Google says it's a real word. And that's where we are, and I think you don't need it. And the less is more. You know what I mean? You can create an atmosphere by not knowing, and that's what's brilliant about the beginning of the first Resident Evil, is you do not know what the fuck is going on. And that's fantastic. And it's weird, and things are just a bit odd, and everything's a bit off kilter, and it looks like a big mansion, but is it? Just great.
That's every horror film ever made, though, isn't it? Here's the setup, here's the situation, here's the antagonist, the demon, whatever it is. But there has to be an investigation element to it to figure out why this is happening. Ring is a great example. And tying it back into Japanese horror. You know, here's this thing that's happening, this is why. But then they embark on this investigative journey to try and break the sequence, to try and fix the situation. And I think that is a big staple of the horror genre in general.
My favourite memory of The Ring, which I loved when I saw it.
I shat myself the first time I saw Ring.
Absolutely horrific.
Fucking hell. I spent an hour of it thinking, well, this isn't very scary. And then she starts coming out of TV and I fucking nearly died.
A DVD extra on The Ring that is just a video of the TV in a room with the static on the screen. And I turned that on, I finished the film and, you know, composed myself and tried to pull my shit together on my own in my flat in the middle of the night and put on that DVD extra and watched about 3 seconds of it and went, nope. That ain't happening. To Resident Evil earlier in this week, the first time I died before I got to a save room. That's not strictly speaking true. I got to the save room and I was like, oh, I'm alright, I'll carry on. And then got killed by a bunch of fucking crows, which is
gross. My experience of it earlier on was the first zombie I came to, I just thought, I'm going to shoot it until it dies. Every single bullet I had, 15 bullets, and the fucker wasn't dead.
Did you not pop his head off?
No.
Oh, there you go. And again, that is a masterpiece of design. The fact that in order to shoot them in the head and kill them quickly, you have to wait until they are right on top of you. You can't. There is like they are, you know, a fraction of a second away from grabbing you, before you can shoot them in the face, which is brilliant. It's such a brilliant piece of design. But interesting talking. Going back to Sweet Home. Sweet Home, the characters have permadeath. There are 5 characters, and if you die on the second screen, one of the characters, they're gone, and the game kind of replaces them with items that you have to carry. But then you've got item management to worry about on top of everything else as well. So a really clever piece of design, and I think Resident Evil's approach to that of the save room and that whole not save anywhere, not restart from the point you died, and really bringing that to bear is what makes it work in that way, the same way. It's another thing, it's another layer onto the fixed camera angles and the tank controls, and the fact that you have to find a save room to save, that adds to the stress and the things that you need in order for a game like that to work.
Here's an interesting question for you. At the start, if you play as Chris in Resident Evil, you don't have a gun. Why not? He's got one in the intro when they're running into the mansion. Does he drop it? Does he lose it?
I don't know. I wish I could tell you, mate.
He goes off, finds the first zombie. What the fuck? I haven't got a gun. You come back to the opening bit in the hall and you pick up Jill's gun rather than Chris's own one, which presumably at some point he ran out of bullets, so he threw it at a zombie. as you do in the 80s and 90s action films. I've run out of bullets, I'll throw the gun away. I love the idea that there's one of the dogs from the intro sequence running around with a pistol embedded in its head.
It's an interesting point. I've never thought about that. But I mean, I must admit, I just don't consider that intro movie like canon. I don't actually consider it part of the game.
You don't consider the game part of the game?
Yep. It's just, I just, selective blindness. I just pretend it doesn't exist. But yeah, it's just so bad. And I know the game's cheesy.
But it's supposed to be bad. That's the point.
Is it?
Yes.
Is it?
Yes, I'm pretty sure. Even at the time, it was cheesy. It was bad. It was ridiculous. The opening intro movie is designed to set the scene, and that's it. It does that quite well.
But the game isn't at any point trying to be funny.
No. Yeah, it's deadly serious the whole way through, isn't it?
Even with Jill's sandwich and the Master of Unlocking and all that stuff. It's just
but the Master of Translocking thing is a translation issue.
Yeah, but I think it's all a translation issue. I think it's all just slightly badly translated, obviously badly acted.
Definitely badly acted. And
it's great. And you played any of the EDF games? EDF, Earth Defense Force.
I think I have. I think I've played one of them.
Yeah, but the first one,
really hokey alien invasion. Yeah, I think I have. Like a weird, free to play but pay for shit.
The more recent ones are, yeah. Don't know if there were earlier ones, but the ones that sort of seen as the first one is on the Xbox 360, very early doors, EDF 2017. And that was like lots of really bad acting, really badly translated script snippets and things like that. There's bugs, very huge bugs, and all this sort of nonsense. And it's properly funny because it's unintentional. But then after that, they kind of cottoned on and tried to make it happen. And they're not as good. And I think I'm glad that Resident Evil never tried to do that. It never went that route of leaning into the hammy bad acting thing. It just kind of glossed over it.
Yeah.
The intro to Resident Evil is live action video, not full, because I think of FMV as like pre-rendered when I hear FMV.
From a technical point of view, FMV is literally just any piece of video that's being streamed direct from the disc. So whether that's computer generated or filmed footage, It doesn't matter. It's just a video.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, it is just that intro and no other bit of FMV on the first Resident Evil that is live action. After that, I mean, is there? Of course, there's loads of other FMV bits, aren't there? There's all sorts of.
There's little bits.
Yeah, they're not long, but there's the first zombie you encounter. It has a little FMV bit, doesn't it, and stuff like that.
If you try and open the front door, there's a really bad bit of a dog trying to come in. There's the ending videos as well. They're back to live action footage, aren't they? If I remember right,
them at all.
I could be wrong.
But no, yes, you're right. I can remember somebody going to sleep against somebody in a helicopter. No, you're absolutely right. Of course they are. They're live action. Yeah.
But yeah, nothing in between.
For me, Resident Evil 2, by going pre-rendered and how beautiful that pre-rendered artwork is,
and still is.
That's a step worth taking, and it's one of those things, isn't it? You would have thought, given the choice of some pictures or some video footage, you would choose video footage. But the FMV looks incredible, and to this day, and is incredibly powerful in game as well. It just works, and I think there's for me, who finds the jump between live action and the game a bit too much. The FMV in the game I'm all right with. That's close enough, even though it's not very close. I'm much more comfortable with that. And as I say, it's another beautiful thing to add to all the beautiful things in the game, like the music, like the level design, like the backgrounds. It's all stunning, and I think having the FMV be part of that rather than having live action battle against it there's a win for me. And that, again, there's bits of Code Veronica, they use, what do they call it, in-engine, where they just use the graphics engine and tell the story like that. And I kind of, there is FMV in there, pre-rendered stuff, but they rely on the in-engine stuff a lot, and it doesn't feel right for a Resident Evil game to me. I think
I'm a big fan of them.
What, in-engine?
I'm more a fan of an in-engine cutscene. Not even a cutscene. Have you ever played Half-Life?
I don't think so. I think I played Half-Life 2, but not Half-Life.
Yeah, Half-Life 2 as well. You're free to move and stand where you want for a lot of the scripted interactions with people. So you kind of frame it as you want. And I've always liked that. I've always liked the idea of just characters existing within the world and just talking to you. Yeah, I've always been a big fan of that. But I do, you are right, I absolutely love the sequences in Resident Evil 2. They are fantastic. I can still to this day just picture a few of them. And I know you don't like it, even though you've probably never really played it. Final Fantasy VII did a fantastic thing with its FMV sequences, where you would have an FMV sequence and the sort of the final shot of it would be the pre-rendered background of the next bit you played, which was just beautiful. It's such a genius thing to do. That is
quite cool.
That linking thing of a pre-rendered background and it being literally the last shot of an FMV sequence, and then you ran through it as a literally 4 triangle polygon figure.
I haven't played Final Fantasy VII. I haven't played many RPGs at all, because whenever I have played them, I've hated them, and so it's the genre rather than an individual example that's put me off.
Is it a frustration thing with pacing?
Yes.
Is it a speed thing? You haven't got the patience.
I cannot be bothered to read your terrible, terrible script. It's not why I play games, and it is almost entirely down to that. Your writing is not good enough for me to sit here and click through pages and pages and pages of it. It's bad. The best written video game of all time is probably not worth reading. It's just, it comes back to exposition as well. I hate over exposition in general in anything. I fully hold my hands up and go, yes, I'm probably missing out on some of the best video game experiences ever made, and I get it. I think the last RPG I tried was one of the Mass Effect games. I'm not here to read or listen to your terrible story, your sub B movie plot, and everyone gets so hung up on the romance angle in those games, and it's all so terribly written. I mean, what is fucking wrong with you? This is what you want for your little fucking digital dolls that you play with. I'm interested for you to tell me why Resident Evil 2 is the best game on the PlayStation.
I think by any measurable thing, it is the best game on the PlayStation. The only real comparison, in my mind, is Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
If you're talking best game on the PlayStation, you get to a point where you whittle away things like Grand Theft Auto, Gran Turismo, other bits and bobs, and you're left with those two, basically neck and neck.
I think that's fair.
And I think, going back now, Resident Evil 2 is the game I'd rather play.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If you're basically left with nothing to compare the two, other than which would you want to play right now, I would want to play Resident Evil 2. So when literally when you get to like a dead heat at the end of all your deliberation and debate, okay, this is better for that, this is better for that, this is better for that, blah 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 blah. But what do you want to play right now?
Yeah, so it basically comes down to you can be you can be as scientific as you like, couldn't you? And I always
Yeah.
think it's folly to try and be scientific about media and art and all that sort of thing. It's always kind of come down to personal preference.
Yeah, well, of course it does.
So you're just saying that you come down to it, it's just, you look at them and you go, it's Resident Evil 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Not for me. Tomb Raider is potentially the greatest video game ever made for me. So it's not just on the PlayStation or, of Gen 5 or 6 or whatever it was in 5, just of all time.
You've only got to look at what the most popular games of the last 2 or 3 years are. Remakes, HD remasters.
Yeah.
There's fucking tons of them.
Yeah.
Admittedly, some of them are very good. In particular, the Resident Evil 2 remake is very, very good.
That's a good segue.
But at what point do you call it its own game?
Well, yeah, I think you're right. I haven't played it. I don't know of it, but from what I understand, and Brett, you can tell me, it's those more passive elements, the plot and the characters, that are the same, and the gameplay elements, which is what makes a game, are very different. Am I right?
Yes, I would say so. It's mostly the same plot.
Yeah.
It's mostly the same puzzles. There are a few differences. The BOW is chasing you almost from the start.
Okay.
Very early on. And fucking terrifying.
Talking of, this is surely the perfect opportunity for you to tell our listeners about your experience. Way back in 1998, was it?
There's a sequence in the police precinct where you're in a room. I think it's a press room.
Yeah,
right.
It looked. In my brain, it's like a classroomy type thing, isn't it?
It's like a press room with a lectern at one end.
That's right.
You go up to this lectern to search for what you think might be an item, and the tyrant nemesis BOW, whatever you want to call him, smashes through the wall, prompts a fight. It's a proper jump scare moment that absolutely you jump at your fucking skin the first time with no prior knowledge of it.
Yeah.
Everyone in the world jumped out their skin when that happened. So, okay, yeah, fair enough. Shit, deal with it. Shoot him, whatever, run away. Job done. Brilliant. That's happened a couple of times up to that point. It's not the first time you meet him, is it?
No.
So you've had him turn up, shoot him, he goes down. Okay, yeah, I've got the gist of this. You shoot him a bit and he falls over. Great, I can run away and carry on with what I was doing before.
Yeah.
So you come out of this room after putting him down. You turn around in an L-shaped corridor around the room that you were just in. And halfway down the corridor, as you're running along, he bursts through the fucking wall again. And it scared the living shit out of me to the point where I basically had an asthma attack because of it. I had to pause the game for several minutes. This was about midnight or one. It's very, very late at night. So there's nothing. There's no lights in the house. It's not middle of the day. It's playing the game properly at night.
Absolutely.
When it should be the only thing you're looking at. Oh, fucking hell. It scared the living shit out of me. But it's always been my overriding memory of Resident Evil 2 has been that particular moment.
That
more than any
particular
other.
asthma attack.
Oh, it's fucking great.
The thing that amazes me about that is that I loved that moment myself. I mean, that properly made me jump out of my skin. It was and a brilliant, because as you say, the cadence of it has got, and you're right, he comes and you shoot him and he goes down and you carry on and you won't see him again for an hour or whatever. You'll get on. So you've got used to that, and it's such a brilliant piece of game design that you literally run out of the room, turn around a corner, and he just powers through the wall 30 seconds afterwards. It's pure genius. It's absolutely brilliant. But the weird thing is that I never hear anybody else talk about it.
Really?
Yeah, I've never heard anyone else mention it as a great moment in the game.
Literally the best moment in the game.
I think it's fantastic. Everyone goes on about the dogs in the first one and stuff like that. I've never without mentioning it first, I've never heard it mentioned by anybody as a great bit of the game. And we both experienced it in isolation as a massively notable moment.
Yeah.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
That is strange.
But yeah, it properly genius and properly terrifying.
But that's one of the things of these kinds of games. Actually, broaden that out. I wouldn't just say these kinds of games. That's a thing of games in general. You come away from a game with a particular thing that you remember. Somebody else might play the exact same game and not remember any of it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, because the alternative to that is what you get in... You certainly had in a lot of modern games, and then get back to my rants about Gen 7 again. Gen 7 became a point where video games became closer to films than ever. Very much a controlled experience, very much the illusion of freedom was more important than actual freedom. And when that's the case, everyone has the same story to tell. Like, everyone who's played BioShock will tell you the same story about BioShock. Everyone who's played Uncharted will talk about the same set pieces in Uncharted. No one's got their own experience, their own little story to tell about those games. That has been taken away. I think it's coming back. I think the worst of it is over, and I think the developers are starting to realize that people want some freedom in their experience. But when I rant about Gen 7, that's the sort of thing I'm ranting about. That's what happened in Gen 7 that is not what I love about video games. It's the exact opposite of that.
On rails gaming.
Yeah, I would rather talk to somebody who played Resident Evil 2 and had nothing to say about it, and then talk to 3 other people who had something different to say about it, rather than everybody have exactly the same thing to say about it. Of those 30 Resident Evil games, do you know how many were on the Game Boy family?
Oh, fuck me, here we go.
Of consoles.
All of them. There's always a Game Boy version of everything, isn't there? Isn't this how it works? Actually, I'll go on a limb and say that the recent remakes aren't on the Game Boy.
You think?
Because they're pretty high res in terms of Game Boy.
To the best of my knowledge, so the Game Boy family being...
I would arguably say very, very few.
Yeah, some people could consider the DS continuation of the Game Boy range. I don't. To me, the Game Boy is the Game Boy Color, and the Game Boy Advance. For me, those 3 is the Game Boy family. And to the best of my knowledge, there is only one Resident Evil game on those consoles.
Deadly Silence?
Yeah, see, that's DS. It's called Resident Evil Gaiden.
Oh, yeah.
And it's sort of it's on the Game Boy Color. It's quite rare now. It's quite hard to get hold of. And it's...
Shit. I don't know. It might be amazing.
It's got a very interesting combat mechanism. So it's...
I'm watching a video right now where there's like a slider going back and forward across the screen. You have to time it.
Yeah.
It's like PGA Tour Golf meets Resident Evil. I love it.
That's a great point. Yeah, so that's the combat. And the graphics on the combat are quite cool as well. They're very sort of atmospheric. And they interestingly they hark back to Sweet Home. I think there's a lot of similarity between the graphical style of Resident Evil Gaiden and Sweet Home.
Just looking through the sort of description of it. The game is non-canon, as its plot is contradicted by the main series in key parts, and its events are ignored.
Oh, wow.
Much like the Game Boy in general.
By you.
I have this weird opinion of the Game Boy. I really do. I love it. I love what they did with it. It doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned. It's like the history of gaming.
I don't think you've ever been more wrong about anything.
Well, no, I'm stating my opinion, which can't be wrong.
Well, no, it can.
No, that's my opinion. Opinions can't be wrong.
On this occasion. Just this one single occasion about this one thing. I'm fascinated by that. They've just decided to ignore it as this game, though. Just nah.
Yeah.
Just nah. Nobody played it. Fuck it. We'll just gloss over that. I played it sort of as a sort of curiosity a long time ago, actually on an emulator. But I bought it for my nephew for his birthday a long time ago. He's still got it. Just to buy him something a bit special for his birthday one year, I found him a copy of this and picked it up for him. Don't know what it goes for now. We haven't had a good old "how much does it go for now" segment, have we? Let's have a look. Looks like it goes for in the region of about £100. If you want the cardboard box and the manual and all that as well, you're looking at around about 250.
Fucking hell.
Yeah. I don't think the one I got, Daniel, had the box. But,
can't have sold well then.
Game Boy Color had a bunch of games that came out sort of towards the end of its life in tiny numbers, and so are now highly sought after.
Do you want to talk about the films?
Oh, I forgot about that. Just briefly, to quote the man himself, it won't take long.
It won't take long.
So, you mentioned in the outro to the last episode that you had seen all of the Resident Evil films.
I have. I don't know why. They're not good. They were never good. I've just always enjoyed them. Much as I enjoyed the Fast and the Furious films, and I would put them on a similar shelf to the Fast and Furious films in that there's been like 6, 7 of them. You know, they're constantly reviewed badly. They're constantly taken the piss out of, but they've made over $1 billion. Joke all you like. They've been a success by any measurable metric. They have been a success, and they are. Well, I say they're not bad. They're not great, but they're not as bad as people would have you believe.
Which is the best one, other than the first one? Because I know the first one is competently made. Other than the first one,
I genuinely can't tell you.
I think all I can say to you, my friend, is the next time I mention a genuinely fantastic film that you haven't seen, I'm going to remind you that you have spent hours of your life watching the Resident Evil films.
Fair.
And on that note, let's talk about getting drunk, because it sounds like it's the only way to watch a Resident Evil film.
Oh, it definitely is.
What do you got for me? Or do you want me? I've been getting you to go first in the cocktails for ages. Do you want me to go first for once?
Oh, no, I was desperate to go first on this, just in case we chose the same fucking one.
Okay, so interestingly, I was impressed that you had decided on your drink like within hours of deciding we were going to do Resident Evil 2.
I found this cocktail while we were still recording last week's episode.
Oh, wow.
It was very, very quick. Very, very few times in my life I've ever typed in something on a search engine and found exactly what I was looking for straight away. This is one of those few incidents.
The thing that I've wanted, and I've been digging around, and somebody has done a cocktail, but the only record of it is one guy making it on YouTube very, very quickly without measures or anything like that in this cocktail. In ode to Wesker, I wanted to find a cocktail called the Sunglasses at Night.
Nice. I like that. I was going to make mention earlier on that Wesker's clearly evil because he's wearing sunglasses at night. If he's not evil, he's a twat.
From the very first second of that live action video, he's got his shades on. But yes, anyway, sorry. The cocktail that you decided on is...
It's simply called Resident Evil. That's it. But there is sort of a nod to a different name within it, which is the G&T virus.
Oh, cool. I like that.
Which I thought was a very, very cool thing, but it is going to be quite a visual thing. Basically, if you go to loading.bar, you'll find the website for a chain of bars, cocktail bars, and gaming bars. They've got one in Brighton and 2 in London. Cool. And I think this is genuinely somewhere we should go because this looks great fun.
Brighton's just down the road from me. So.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, for the Resident Evil, you've basically got a highball glass with a load of ice in it, 15 millilitres of grenadine, 25 millilitres of slow gin, which creates like a sort of a congealed blood looking thing at the bottom of it. And then they have 2 syringes with 5 millilitres each of Midori and blue Caraco. So very blue, very green, in reference to the various G&T virus vials. There's also 10 millilitres of Gordon's and Bombay Sapphire gin in there and 200 millilitres of Sprite. If you just go to loading.bar and look up Resident Evil, that'll give you the visual that you need for this, and you do need the visual.
I mean, it looks great. It's a really, really not. And we talked about this at length on the flashback episode. That the presentation of cocktails is so much part of the experience when you go out drinking, and that does look awesome. That's fantastic.
So yeah, the Resident Evil. But in finding this, I found Loading Bar, which is a place I now genuinely want to go to.
Yes,
because it looks really good fun.
No, that's a great one. I mean, I never got close to finding that. I never would go as blatant as just to look for the name of the game, but that's a great find. There was a lot of sort of horror film themed cocktails that I was looking at and looking for ideas of that didn't really tickle my fancy. My favourite cocktail, my number one cocktail, bar none, is the Corpse Reviver number 2. Utterly gorgeous. It's got a bit of aniseed in there, which I love. It's very sharp and lemony, which I love. For my bar at my wedding, when I had my cocktails, Gemma and I had a cocktail each to sort of represent us at a wedding, and that was the one I had for me. It's sort of that much my number one drink, and because it is that beloved of me, I couldn't let it represent Resident Evil. Because I don't love Resident Evil as much as I love the Corpse Reviver number 2. But our good friend of the show, Simon Difford, on his magnificent website, Difford's Guide, talks about a version of that, which he made himself. There's a good few different versions of the Corpse Reviver. The number 2 is my go-to, but he has another one.
Why is it number 2?
Because
is there a number 1?
Yeah, there is a number 1. Number 1's a brandy cocktail. It's actually quite different. But these are the original recipe. Corpse Reviver number 1 and number 2 are from Harry Craddock's Savoy Cocktail Book, which is one of my favourite sources for cocktails. It's a proper 1920s cocktail book. The one is brandy, and I can't remember what else. I didn't particularly like it, but the 2 is just a joyous thing. Difford came up with his own version, and a couple of reasons I wanted to choose for this for Resident Evil. One is you, my good friend, because the Corpse Reviver number 2 is the sort of the key spirits is gin, and you're not a fan. And so in this version is made up of tequila, Cointreau, blank, lemon juice, and absinthe. So no gin to annoy you.
It doesn't mean you can't pick it.
So I thought, and it's called the Cadaver Reviver as well, which I just think is a little bit more Resident Evil feeling than Corpse Reviver. So yeah, it's one. Most Corpse Reviver variants are very even measures of things. So this is a shot of tequila, a shot of Cointreau, a shot of Lillet Blanc, and then 15 ml of lemon juice and a dash of absinthe. Shake it all up.
That sounds really nice, actually. I've got to say.
It is really, really. I mean, I've had this before. I didn't realise it was called a Cadaver. I've heard it called a Corpse Reviver number 3, and I've heard it called a Tequila Corpse Reviver. But Difford's got it down as a Cadaver, so that's what I'm calling it.
Fair enough. Just looking on Difford, says Corpse Reviver number 0824.
Yeah, I saw that earlier, with no explanation of why either.
Yeah.
But for everyone, just go and have a look up various versions of the Corpse Reviver. They're really interesting drinks. They're usually quite nice. And absinthe is quite a sort of a polarising drink, but you just put a couple of dashes in it in your Corpse Reviver, and it's absolutely delicious. Just that sort of sits there in the background. Beautiful.
I'm just looking at the Corpse Reviver number 1. That sounds quite nice.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan, but it's just sort of I like a citrus cocktail, and it's not in that sort of wheelhouse, is it really?
Yeah.
If I remember right.
Just look at the first ingredient lists: Avalon Calvados. Never heard of that.
Brandy, just apple brandy.
Is it brandy? So it's brandy, cognac, vermouth, absinthe.
Yeah.
There's nothing to water that down, is there?
No, absolutely not. But yeah, so Calvados is sort of an apple brandy, and then obviously cognac is just brandy as well.
Okay. So. I'd give that a go, definitely. Right, so that's Resident Evil covered. What should we do next?
So I know we talked off air about doing one of the classic Aliens games, but I think rather than that's pushed me in the direction of instead going for XCOM.
Do you mean UFO?
I mean Rebel Star. I can play that game too. Yes, UFO, Enemy Unknown, Julian Gollop's PC classic. Some consider it the greatest PC game ever made to this day.
Good choice. I've got a lot to say on that.
We'll be discussing it a fair bit, that it's exactly the sort of game that I don't normally like, and why on earth that is.
I was going to ask, surely this is not the sort of game you normally like.
It really isn't, but if you want to hear more about that, you're going to have to tune in next week and hear us talk about the UFO/XCOM series. See you then.